GG, Galero Gaming. Builds, guides, walkthroughs, and gameplay.
Alright, so today I'm going to go over the 3 games that I'm currently playing. The first of which is probably the most popular, Final Fantasy XIV Online. Amazing game, it looks beautiful, it's probably one of the most overall balanced MMORPGs I've ever played. The class balancing guide in this game is just phenomenal. There's no real, this is the best class, you must have this one, nothing else works. You can clear all the content in the game with any class and any class combination. There is a meta top tier, but it's only by such small percentages. You can get to anywhere in the game with any class. It's more of a game where you need to be good at your class rather than have a good class, which to me is a very big thing. It means that they've done something right, and they've done something that most game companies can't seem to do in terms of MMORPGs, which is eliminate a meta. Now, me personally, in the clip that I'm showing here, I'm using a Dancer. It's considered the lowest DPS class, but it's a buff DPS class. It takes somebody else in the party and makes your partner stronger. So all my attacks that I'm doing, the primary dance, the full dance, buff partner, they all increase my partner's overall DPS. So it makes my DPS higher because I'm making somebody else's DPS higher. Now that's what makes this class very special and very unique, is it's one of the primary buff classes that's used because it's a very consistent buff setup. Now for me, the only real detractor is that the combat in this can feel a little slow at times. The pace for it's very slow. But it's also a very mechanic heavy game. So you're usually always doing something and you have to move around things on the map at all times. Certain classes, like for example my second main, Black Mage, where you have to stand still to cast all of your skills and there's a prolonged cast time on it, have difficulty in certain dungeons and certain content because of how much movement is required in combat. You have to find the right place, know your timings on everything, know how the monster is going to move before it attacks, so you can be where you need to be so you have enough time to cast it. That's why a very common and one of the strongest overall DPS builds for a Black Mage is a spell speed build. You can get your cast times out faster so you can move quicker. You have less time where you have to stand still. And then you have like my Dancer here where I have no cast time increase at all. So I'm going off of the global cooldown completely for all the skills. So it's a little bit of a slower paced character. Now there's 3 different ways of using skills in this game. You've got your OGCDs with a timer, you've got your OGCDs with a proc, and you've got your GCDs. GCD stands for global cooldown. So you have skills that are on a set cooldown. All skills are linked to the same one. And then you've got your proc OGCDs, which are like my Fanflare 1, 2, and 3 on here, where I have a percentage chance to gain a charge of this skill and I can cast it between other skills. OGCD stands for off global cooldown. So the other ones are timer based. Other classes, and Dancer has a couple of them, but other classes like Samurai, for example, have a good few OGCDs that you cycle through during your combination and you hit inside of your personal buff windows so you can maximize your damage output. So those classes that have a lot of those OGCDs feel a lot more fast paced than Dancer, where there's not nearly as many. I have a few of them. I get 4 procs on it, and usually I cast them inside of my big buff window. Otherwise I just cast them once I fill up to have space to get more, so I'm not losing potential damage. Now the game itself, when you're playing in boss fights, I chose the dungeon that you see behind you because it's got a lot of different types of mechanics in it. It's a pretty easy dungeon. It's a standard content at the end game, but there's a lot of different types of mechanics. You've got a stack mechanic, you've got split mechanics, you've got line mechanics, you've got circle mechanics, you've got rotating mechanics. All these different types of mechanics show up in this dungeon, so it makes a great show to give you an idea of what the mechanic build in this game looks like for the actual combat, because most of this game is going to be based around your knowledge of your character that you play and your knowledge of the dungeon, so you know when to move and where to move based on the fight that you're in. It really makes this game feel a lot more like a traditional MMORPG that's mechanic heavy learn your class. It's hard to be great at all of them. Personally, I like to main Dancer and Black Mage. If I'm really comfortable with a dungeon, I'll take my Black Mage in there because they've got one of the highest DPSs in the game, and they're a lot of fun for me because it's a challenge to take into content. If I'm unfamiliar with the content, I'll take my Dancer because it's a very high mobility. I don't want to say easy to play, but it is one of the easier classes to play. But I like it because of the high mobility and party benefits that come from the class itself. Now, the reason this isn't the main game that I'm playing, I played it for a while. One of my buddies from work got me into it actually. Started playing it, really enjoyed it, brought me back to the good old days of MMORPGs that just felt great to play, having multiple skill bar setups, getting everything going, and just moving through. But this is a very story-driven game. If you love a story, they make and build an amazing storyline. Me personally, I'm more of an in-game dungeon player. I love doing the dungeons. I love fighting the hard bosses. Right now, we're at the end of the chapter setup that they did, and the most recent DLC that they came out with one new dungeon, one new extreme trial, and one new 24-man raid. I completed all the new content within like a day and a half of it being released and farmed out some gear. There was a slight gear increase, a couple new sets that were introduced, but nothing overly big to really pull me back in and make me want to grind for months on end in the game. So I play this one every now and then when I want to get back in and just play something a little more comfortable, go farm out some new gear, play the dungeon itself. When they bring out new content and a bigger DLC for it, I'll be right back onto it, playing it again for a while most likely. Great game, amazing MMORPG, probably one of the best on the market right now, and I would honestly say in my 20 years of playing, one of the most balanced MMORPGs that I've ever played. The balance in this game is unreal. I've never played a game where everything actually fits together and it feels perfect. There's nothing that is overly strong and nothing that is overly weak. There's a few classes that are usually frowned upon, but they bring something to the party that's still useful and they can still go through any content in the game. The second game that I'm going to talk about is Smite. I've been playing this one on and off again for a few years now. One of my buddies that I used to work with got me into it. For me, it's more of a you pick it up, you play it for a while whenever you have time that you don't really want to commit time to do anything else. You set aside 15 minutes for a match, maybe 20 for a longer match, and you just go in and you relax and you have fun. I mean, for me, this game is not really as grindy or stressful as anything else. It's just about putting together your build, going into an arena, and playing with your teammates. You know, I mean, I don't play any of the game modes like Conquest or anything else that they have in there. I only stick to arena play because it's short, it's non-committal, and I'm not going to be there for a couple hours playing a Conquest match. Personally, me, I like to stick with the mages, the assassins, and the tanks have become a very personal favorite of mine. Some of my favorites in each class for tanks, love Athena, enjoy Ares, Jorg is great, and then on the warrior side for tanking, Odin's one of my personal favorites, that nice big old shield on command. Amaterasu's another great one that I enjoy too. She gets to be a little bursty and bounce around a lot, heavy movement for disruptions. You know, I mean, to me a tank is all about setting up your team, disrupting the enemy team, debuffing and buffing your team. So you set up your character to take a lot of damage, and then you want to pick something that has some form of disruption on the other team. That way you can break what they're doing. I mean, Athena's taunt. I see a mage or an assassin going after one of my squishies who's trying to escape. Throw the taunt on, pull them away, drop my shields. I've now done damage to them. Usually I run something that on the CC from the taunt will debuff them so they take more damage. And they had that little oh no moment where they're now doing something they weren't expecting to be doing. So they got to either decide to turn and go back after who they were chasing, fight me, or retreat. Or, heaven forbid, my teammate decides to turn around when he sees I taunted and blasts it too, and we take it out. You know, I mean, the tank's all about changing the gameplay for either your team or against the enemy team. You know, and then you've got the mages on there. Personal favorites, Nua, Hera, Merlin, Zeus sometimes, depending on my mood in the day. You know, I mean, I really enjoy those nice, heavy-hitting, hard ones. Nox is amazing when it comes to, like, CC. You throw the silence on, you throw the chain on, you hit them with the damage, and you stop them from moving. You know what I mean? Nua, send the minions after somebody, blow them up, get an AoE stun if there's anybody else around, and it does a lot of damage. Great setups and stuff like that. Great damage. Helps make the difference on the team if you know what you're doing with these type of guys. And then for assassins, it's all about that cleanup. Somebody's getting away, well, guess what? Not anymore. You go after them, you knock them out. You see somebody off on their own, if it's something that you know you can take out, make it quick, huge burst damage, just get in, get out, be done. You know, these classes for me are the ones that I really enjoy playing. And when it comes to assassins, personally, Daji, Thanatos, and Awilix are my 3 favorites. Before all the nerfs that they implemented onto him, Tsukiyomi felt great too. With his AoE and ranged damage that he had, he was a very great feeling character, but they nerfed him so hard that he's hard to use now. Smite to me is just a nice relaxing game. You join in, they put some new skins out for looks every now and then that you might want to grind out for. Like right now I'm working on the new Athena skin that they just launched with the battle pass. There's nothing that you can really buy, there's no levels to grind out, no gear to grind out. Everything's there, you just gotta learn how to make everything work together with your character and learn how to work with your team and the role that each character is supposed to play. And as long as you can play that role and you have a few different roles to play, you'll be fine on any setup that you go with, so long as you know what you're doing and you have a few different options to pick. You know, but you can't really take it too seriously. You're only going to be in there for a 15 or 20 minute match. So just go in, have fun, relax, and just enjoy. I mean, to me, gaming's all about enjoying what you're doing and having a relaxing time. Even if it's something challenging and really hard to do, as long as you're having fun, that's all that really matters when it comes to doing this type of stuff. For most people, it's an escape from something else that they're dealing with. The third game, and the one that I've been playing the most, is Kritika Reboot. It's a relaunch of a game that was initially released back in 2014. It's an action-styled MMORPG. I would honestly say it's kind of like a cross between Terra and Vindictus. You've got all the skills and combat flow of a good action RPG like Terra does, but it's freeform and there's no tab targeting or anything like that. In Vindictus, you still use lights and heavies depending on the class that you're using, along with all of your skills. There's also still dodging and iframes included in it. Now, the game has a lot of different classes to choose from, so each class is actually a character in the game rather than a class where you make your own character. Personally, lately I've been playing a lot of Lina and Hongryong, which is the archer, and I really enjoy the game. Now, I will say ahead of time, this game requires a lot of time to actually get to the higher end content. It's very fast paced to get through 1 through 70, which is the cap. They'll be coming out with a level increase up to 75 along with a rebalancing. As of the day that I'm recording this, they are rebalancing the classes to help solve some imbalance between some of the classes. But you still need to get an idea and a feel for each of the different classes, and the game requires a lot of playtime on it because it has different systems in-game to give you a boost. So each character that you level up to 70 gives you an account-wide bonus to your combat power in the game, the CP. And then there's other things in-game such as titles, emblems, and things like that can either be earned in-game or through loot crates that they have available that you can purchase in-game as well or on their cash shop. And the game can be considered in a way pay to win because you can technically trade out cash for gold and buy certain items on their cash shop, but you can also buy them in-game on the auction house or earn them in-game. So although yes, you can spend cash and get very high in the in-game, you can still do that exact same thing without ever spending a dime. But the game really, towards the end of it, you've got it sectioned off, and it's a very fast-paced game. Some of these dungeons and a lot of the ones that you commonly grind don't take but a couple minutes. And when you go into farming and doing some of the raids and stuff like that, there's a lot of what they call free runs, where basically you just join in somebody else's runs, because the more people in the party, depending on the activity that you're doing, the higher the drop rate. So they'll just take people with them because they can clear the dungeon in 40 seconds on their own, but having 3 additional bodies increases the drop rate. You'll get a quote-quote free run, which means you just join to be increased loot for them, and you get the increased loot rate as well. Now, this helps when you can't complete certain content in game because they allow you to enter it at lower than needed combat power levels. so you can get into it and get gear and items that you can either use or sell to help gear your character up. The game, I would say, is small. The community is not very large, but it is very wide-ranging. I've played with people from all over the world on the game, and the game's population isn't that high. And there's always somebody on at any hour of the day because it's such a wide-ranging area that people play from. Now, it is a peer-to-peer connection, so if you're really far away and one person doesn't have that great of an internet connection, it may just be better for just that one person to do it, because otherwise you might lag them out. But for the in-game as it is right now, the myth gear that's available and everything that you need at the in-game is for the most part farmable without having to actually do anything. You can jump into a free raid and just sit in the raid hub while they clear it for you. You don't have to do it, and your real goal would be getting to be able to do it yourself. I mean, just today I went and me and one other guildie did a free raid for one of the higher raids in R3, pulling them through it and other people. And for me, this was a personal achievement because I hadn't actually gone in there and done that content yet. I just reached 6 million combat power on my toon. For me, that was a big goal because I was able to actually do some of the content that was released. The next step for me will be hitting the 8 to 10 million area where I can go and do R4 and carry other people through it, and then the next one will be hitting 10 million so I can get carried through R5. But as of October 21st, they're increasing the level to 75 to introduce new armor that will hopefully also help rebalance the classes as well. The company, even though the game is small, is doing a lot with the game and continuously applying updates and new events and things like that to the game. And it's being balanced very well. The game plays good. I mean, there's obviously certain classes that are very high up that do a lot more damage, but with the balance patch that comes out today, they should even out a lot of classes and there should be a decent balance to it. Nothing like the balance on Final Fantasy XIV where everything's even, but in a game where they're asking for like 20 million combat power at the high end right now, and there's people sitting with 330 million combat power, at that point in time, you're still just one-shotting all the mobs in there at that level. And, you know, I mean, I've heard of people doing naked raids and stuff like that where they take all of their gear off and just run through it at their very base combat power just to have a challenge in it and have fun with it. So the game really allows for a wide variety of play in there, and with all the different types of classes in it, the play potential in your range is very wide. You can do a lot with it. So the game is fun. It's nothing too big. It's not going to be my main for years or anything like that. But I will say that I do enjoy the gameplay. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy the action combat style that they use in this. You can build your combos up, get better with your class, learn the rotations for it, and how the play is working for that particular class. And each of the classes has their own imprints. 3 different types of imprints that change the skills that you already had on the class so that you can then have those skills work in a different manner to create a different type of build. And then, you know, some of the classes have first and second awakenings, which when you go into a buff phase, make your skills do something different or give you different buffs passively throughout the regular running time as well. So there's a lot of variety and different play styles that come into this, and as you're leveling and playing, the gameplay itself evolves. And then when you get to the end game, you start building and working with your character and making the play style different to where you can enjoy more stuff in it. Even then, at the end game still tiered based on the amount of combat power that you get. So the higher you get, the more you have access to, and the faster you can run things, and the harder content that you can do. And then you can go and help other players by giving them free runs and stuff like that. But this is a game that you really need to put a little bit of time in to level your alts and get new gear and run multiple different runs a day. The biggest problem that I have with it is that they lock the amount of runs you can do a day on a character for some of that in-game stuff. So if I want to play my Lena, I can only do a certain amount of runs a day and a certain amount of raids a week with that character. For me, that's a little bit of a detractor on there. You really have to have a lot of different characters to continuously play all the in-game. It's still fun, I still enjoy it, and it kind of forces you to play different classes so you can learn more of the game. So that's the 3 games that I'm currently playing right now. I'll probably make a 0 to 75 leveling guide and some suggestions on actual gameplay and what you should be doing and how to get your character going in Kritika Reboot. I'll probably eventually make some build videos and gear covering guides for Black Mage and Dancer for Final Fantasy XIV. And I mean, I might go and do a Smite guide for a breakdown of each class and types of equipment you want to have for each one and circumstances that you use different types of characters in and stuff like that and ways to play them all. Well, that's it for this week. Have fun, gamers. Go out there and enjoy your worlds that you dive into.